and welcome to Avoka's webinar on Transact version 4. Transact version 4 is a huge release, and we've got a lot of new and updated features. If I try to walk you through everything we've done in version 4, I'd be here for days, at least for hours. Instead, I'm going to walk you through our top 10 list, which is published on our website at the URL that you can hopefully see on your screen. What I'm going to do as I go through that is I'm going to really try and focus on doing demos rather than a whole lot of slides so that you can actually see these features working. You may see a couple of features that look familiar to you depending on which version of Transact you're on at the moment, although this is the first release where we've pulled all of these features together. You may also find some features, we have a lot of customers who use Transact for different reasons, and you may see some features that are of a high degree of interest for you and others that are not so much, but we try to pick something for everyone. As Sarah said, if you do have any questions, please type them into the chat pod, and we may answer them in line or come back to them at the end, but we'll try and make sure we've got plenty of time at the end for questions as well. Sarah, if I can just ask you to keep an eye on the question pod, and if there's anything you think I should cover that I've missed, please interrupt me.
I will.
Just checking, can you see it? Can everyone see the screen at the moment? Sarah, Jeff, Chris, that says Avoka Transact Top 10 Features.
Yes, we can.
I can see just fine, Howard.
Excellent, thanks, Chris. Okay. So I'm just going to run through the top 10 features in summary form, and then I'm going to dive into the demos. So the first thing that we have in this release is something called responsive design, and I'm going to actually spend a bit of time for that. I actually personally think that's the most important feature of this release, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. So I won't cover it off now. Next is something that we call multi-channel tracking. And this is really the ability for a customer who starts a form to begin a transaction on a website, and then it gives them the ability to save that form halfway through and to come back to it either on the same channel or, more importantly, on a different channel. So, for example, they might start completing the form on their phone and finish it either on their desktop or even perhaps by calling the help desk, the call center, and asking somebody to help them, to assist them with that on the phone. Abandonment management is a feature where users do sometimes abandon forms partway through, and for some customers it's really important to try and understand what that abandonment looks like, and also to potentially recover that abandoned user by reaching out to them via another channel such as phone or email and offering them assistance. But obviously if you don't know that they have abandoned and who they are, it's impossible to do that. Something we're focusing on in this release is improved anonymous support. So by anonymous I mean somebody who's not registered with our portal, and usually all we know about them is whatever information they filled into a form, which would often include their name and their email address. And in the past it's really been difficult to interact with anonymous users, and in this release we have more ability to, for example, schedule a task to somebody where all we know about them is their email address. We've got a really nice feature called review and approval, or also known as collaboration, and I'll walk you through that in some detail. It really allows you to create some simple workflows and have forms and people participate in those workflows. Single sign-on, for those who do want registered users, we've really improved our ability to do single sign-on. I'm not going to be demonstrating this, but it's now easier and more effective, and in particular we have support for Microsoft ADFS, or Active Directory Federation services, and if anyone is interested in that, please take it up with your sales rep and we'll look into that in more detail. We have a lot of new features in Composer. In fact, it's really been given a complete facelift, as well as have a bunch of new features added to it, and I'll go through some of those. We've done a lot of integrations with third-party products. and I'll cover off one or two of those. The mobile app has had a number of new features added, and Chris is going to help me out with that and show you some of the new features in the mobile app. And then finally, we have something that's important to understand, but not really a feature per se, which is that from a marketing perspective, we've split Avoka Transact into Transact Web and Transact Field. This doesn't actually represent a difference in product. It represents more a difference in the way that we present the features that we have to prospective customers. Transact Web is more for public-facing customers who allow their customers to fill in forms usually anonymously on the website. Avoka Transact Field is more about having internal employees go out into the field with a tablet or another mobile device and complete forms in the field, either online or offline. And I did want to make sure that everyone understood that this is purely from a marketing perspective. As far as you customers are concerned, it's just one product. It has all the features that you're used to, and you have access to everything in the entire product set. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump into responsive design. Give me 1 second. So just a very quick history of design for mobile devices, which is really what responsive is all about. In the early days, we built sites, and I'm going to use the sample site. We built sites really for desktop devices because that's all we had. Then the mobile phone, the iPhone came along, and suddenly we found that a lot of those sites didn't work really well on those devices. And I'm going to simulate this by shrinking my browser. This is just a traditional, mock-up of a traditional 3-column website. What would happen is when you went down to smaller screen sizes, such as a mobile phone, you just end up with part of the site being cut off. And the same applied to the way we design forms. The only way to actually navigate that is to use the scroll bars or use your finger to swipe from side to side, and it was very inconvenient. So the simplest solution that people came up with is that they would use a layout called liquid layout. And what this does is each of the areas of the site actually can grow and shrink, and the content will adjust accordingly as you do that. And that did allow sites to be to do a little bit better, but you'll still see that when you get to really small sites, things don't really work anymore, and that wasn't very effective. So the next step in this evolution was something called adaptive. And with adaptive, we define in the website a number of screen sizes called breakpoints, and at different breakpoints, again, I'll simulate this. At different breakpoints, the entire layout of the screen will change. So you'll notice that we change at a particular point the size of each of the pods changed, and what you'll notice is that again at a particular point an entire pod has moved. In fact, it's moved down below the bottom of the screen, and as I continue getting to smaller and smaller screen sizes, we end up with a situation where we've actually laid out that entire form differently so that it works on any screen size. And the final evolution of that was to use a combination of both adaptive, which means moving the pods, and liquid, which is called responsive, and that has the content in each of the pods changing as well as moving entire pods. And so that really allows you to go down to very small screen sizes of smaller phones in portrait mode. So with that as introduction, what did we do in forms? Because forms are much more complicated than just a simple website. So we really needed to worry about that. Our first, with Composer, our first attempt to doing responsive was to do what a lot of sites did, which is to actually build two versions of the site, one for desktop and one for the iPhone. And you saw a lot of sites called .mobile or mobile dot or something like that. And that worked for a little while, but it failed. It ultimately failed for two reasons. The first is that there was a lot of maintenance overhead in terms of maintaining two completely different sites. And the second is that there was a proliferation of devices of different sizes, which meant that it was impossible to actually necessarily determine, as we did in early versions of Transact, determining whether it's a phone, a tablet, or a desktop, and rendering up the appropriate one. So we've evolved, as a lot of people in the industry have, to a completely responsive layout, where in modern versions of the Composer templates, there is only one HTML rendition. There aren't three anymore like there used to be, but that rendition has built-in capabilities to respond to whatever screen size it finds itself upon. And what I'm going to do is very quickly build a form that uses our new responsive features and walk you through that. The other thing we want to do, of course, in Composer is, I'm going to call this form 5. As you can see, I've done a few samples already. What we wanted to do is, in order to build responsive designs in HTML, you have to be very familiar with CSS, and in particular these things called CSS media queries, and we wanted to make it a lot simpler to use than that. And so what we do in Composer is, really you don't have to do very much other than just design your form, which is what I'm going to do in a minute. Largely we take care of things, although we have exposed responsive design in a very simple way that does allow you to tweak it on an individual field or overall for the form if you wish to. So what I'm going to do is just start building out this form real quick. I'm going to use a little trick that you may or may not be aware of, just to chuck in a whole lot of sections. It's called the section assistant. It allows me to copy and paste from text. So that's just a whole list of sections that I might have received from a business analyst. The indents imply section level 2s. And finish. And it's just built a form with a whole bunch of section level 1s and 2s. Section level 2s become much more important in responsive designs. You'll see that responsive designs are generally much more expansively laid out, allowing people with finger-friendly devices to navigate more easily. So we use a lot of section level 1s and 2s and kind of space things out a lot more. What I'm going to do is just throw in a couple of quick fields. The usual suspects. First name, I'm going to use Phil as the style. Again, I'm going to use Phil, but I'm going to keep this one on the same line. And then I'm going to add an email field on the next line. And I have a traditional looking layout that's kind of appropriate for desktop devices, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a mobile device in a second. While I'm here, though, I'll just show you a couple of other features in Composer itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in and make some changes to some of these widgets. So the first thing you'll notice is that the property dialog has had a complete redesign, and we've really tried to redesign that in such a way. We know that over the years there are a lot of properties in Composer, and it's sometimes hard to find the ones that you want. We've redesigned this dialog box, and hopefully you'll find things much more easy to find, and we've grouped them together better along with built-in help text to try and assist with that. In this case, what I want to do is go to rules, go to the mandatory rule set, and say this is always mandatory. This gets, by the way, even simpler if you shift to simple mode. So I'll make first name mandatory, and I'll make last name mandatory. Always mandatory. That's all I'm going to do for this form. I'm going to leave the rest of the sections blank. And then the first thing I'll point out is that there is only really one HTML rendition. there is also an HTML receipt, which I'll come back to if we have time. But what I'm going to do is render this HTML receipt as kind of looking like a desktop form. And what you'll see is something that would look good on a desktop. By the way, forms do now have a maximum size, so no matter how big I make my screen, sometimes what we'd find is that forms actually get quite tedious to work with if they continue growing. So forms now have a maximum size. And we've also, have started favoring this top level menu rather than left one, because that just makes better use of real estate. We do also have, I'm not going to be demoing it today, but we do have two-level menus as well, so you can actually have sub-menus within these top menus. But the menus look quite nice, and they're quite easy to navigate, both with fingers and with a mouse. But let's have a look at the responsive features. As I again shrink this form down, you'll see that there are a number of breakpoints, and we'll see those occurring. The first breakpoint occurs there. And what you may have noticed is that the menu, section level 2 menus switched from being at the left of the fields to the top. Let's keep going. You'll see it's liquid within that, in that the text is actually relaid out and the fields actually resize. But at a particular point, something interesting happens. Firstly, the fields themselves are now, they were starting to get too small to be usable. So what we did is at that breakpoint, we relayed them out to be vertical rather than side by side. And we also expanded them to fit all of the available real estate. You'll also notice that, and that's kind of responsive design in terms of layout. But you'll also notice that forms are a little more complicated in that there are some other features. So where has our navigation got? Where the navigation got too small to display horizontally. And what we've actually done is replace the top level navigation with something that phone users would be very familiar with, which is a menu. And the little menu is up here. I don't know if you can see that animation, but essentially we can now navigate in a very concise and clear way by using the top level menu. And also some of the key things that you might want to do with this form, including save and close, which again I'll come back to, are also on that menu. So that's the other thing we do, in addition to just laying out, is also adjusting the way that the menu works interactively based on the available screen real estate. The last thing I'd like to show you about responsive before I move on is I'm actually going to try and fill in this form, and I'm going to do that first as a desktop and just show you what the error handling looks like. So there are a couple of mandatory fields on the form. If I hit submit, I will get a summary of those, and I can see those nicely. If I click on one of them, it'll take me straight to it. And of course, we also have inline errors as well as the summary at the top. And these things can be moved around and restyled, etc. But that's really how error handling works. Problem is when you're on a mobile device, if you show that amount of real estate along the top, particularly if there are a lot of errors, you actually end up obscuring the whole screen and not actually being able to see your form anymore. So what we do on a mobile device is we adjust again the way that we display errors, and if I have an error on a mobile device, instead of listing out the errors, I simply get a summary, and it says touch here to resolve the first error, and it'll take me to that first error. Of course, as I fill it in, we clear those errors as we go, so you're getting that interactive feedback. Okay, so again, there's nothing really to do, although we do have in the form, under nuts and bolts, we have, you can actually modify these responsive rules or create your own. And we do have on the individual fields, under rules, we do have responsive rules which you can adjust on a field by field basis if you wish to. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to the next feature. While I am here, one other thing to notice about Composer is that the number of options in the styling drop-down menus at the top is dramatically reduced. That doesn't mean that there are fewer of them. it actually means that what we've done is done some consolidation. So very often with some of our templates, you end up with a bewildering array of different options that you could select from. What we've changed that to is an approach where we build more of that into the templates, and typically each organization will only get a very small number of options in this top level menu that are specifically designed to work with their styles of forms. Okay. I'll come back to Composer in a little while if we have time. Okay, just rearranging some screens. Okay, let's have a look at multi-channel tracking. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a version of the form that I was building before. I want to point, this is just the landing page for that form. I do want to point you out to a new button that appears on the landing page called Open Saved Form. But for now, I'm just going to open up that form. And what I'm going to do is just start filling it out, and then I'm going to get real busy and run out of time. Oops. And this is basically the same form I was building before, just with a few little extra features. So what I did when I built this form is I turned on right at the very beginning a feature called tracking, and that does a few things. Firstly, by default in our templates you have this thing called a tracking code, which you can rename, but essentially it's a code that allows you to always come back to this form. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the save and close button and just show you how that works. So I'm going to hit save and close, and I'm saved. The tracking code is now displayed on this confirmation page. There are a number of algorithms to generate that, but typically we're looking at just a very simple 6-digit code. And if you know that code, that's all you need in order to get back to your form, either on this device or on a different device, or even by calling the call center. So what I'm going to do is return back to that saved form and just show you what that looks like. We can enter in the tracking code, or if it's already provided in the link, that'll embed it automatically. And then optionally, we can have a challenge question, which is some information that only I would know, usually data from the form. If I try and open that form with the incorrect code, it won't let me in. If I provide the correct data, I'll be back to the form exactly where I left it. And there we are back again. I will also draw your attention to this full name, and I'll come back and talk about some of the performance features in there in Composer later. But I'm back, and I can just keep going with my form. So that makes it very easy for customers, even anonymous customers, to come back to a form after they've started filling it in, and all they really need to know is that tracking code. I'm going to show you one other quick feature, which is improved anonymous support. So you've already seen some of that tracking. Multi-channel tracking is part of improved anonymous support. But let me show you another quick feature. What we often find is that our customers, while I'm here, we do also have an improved signature widget. A lot of the widgets in Composer have been improved. There are several new ones as well. I just want to show you what this new signature widget looks like. Firstly, it pops up the signature panel as a pop-up rather than doing it in place, which caused problems with scrolling. The actual signature widget now looks much more like a pen, and really gives us quite a nice look, and that looks even better when you're not doing it with a mouse and you actually have a tablet or a phone, something with a stylus. It actually works quite nicely. So in terms of anonymous support, I'll just show you one other thing. We often find that anonymous customers, I might start completing a form and then decide that I'd like my wife or some other party to complete it or to assist me with that. And so what I can do is, in this case, I'm going to share it with myself, but what I can do is share this with a third party, hit the share button, now I've effectively closed the form, and what I will get in my email is an email that looks a little bit like that. how to share the form with you, please click here to fill it in. The user experience is very similar in that we get the tracking code and an optional challenge question. And as soon as I provide that information, I'm in. But now as another different party who can now collaborate with you on filling in that form. Okay. All right. Let's have a look at some other features. I'd like to talk to you about abandonment. And I'm going to go back into this form. So there are lots of different ways. By the way, did anyone notice a little, as the form opens, you get a little progress bar. You may or may not have seen it on the screen, depending on how responsive it is. But that is part of our performance improvements. One of the things we know is that if you tell somebody how something is loading, they're much more, and that it is loading, they're much happier to wait for a couple of seconds, and this particularly on larger and more complex forms. So the progress dialog just does tell somebody that something's happening. So what I can do at any point in a form is I can abandon it, and I can abandon it either explicitly, which I've added to this form in the way of a cancel button, or I could abandon it by just leaving it in my browser until my session time's out, or I could actually save it and forget to come back to it. And what I'd like to show you is, in this case, I have actually cancelled. So what I'd like to show you is, I'm going to remove the screen for a second. I'm going to show you some features in Transaction Manager that allow us to determine who has abandoned the transactions and actually configure those. So the first thing we have is an abandoned transaction screen in Transaction Manager. Just re-log in. And in that we can simply view any transactions that have been abandoned and reasons if they are given. You can see this is the one that I've just that I have just abandoned, and I can see exactly what's happened in terms of how this has occurred. I'm just going to go back to the summary screen. I can also actually go and look at the form as it stands at the moment. I'm not going to do that. There are also some features I can build into the form, percentage complete and transaction score in particular. We can build some calculations in the form that actually score how far this user has actually gotten in completing the form. They may have only opened the form and immediately quit, or they may have provided some core information like their name and contact details, or actually even gotten further through the form. And you can assign a score based on how far they've gotten through it. And then firstly, you can see the score, you can get back to them, you can see the information they've completed, and then contact them via some other channel. But when you actually configure the form, we can also, rather than having to come into Transaction Manager to do this, we can actually configure some information about the form. And this screen here allows you to configure how long to wait before we determine that a particular transaction has been abandoned, as well as what to do with abandoned transactions, whether to deliver them via an alternate delivery service or the same delivery service. And we can also set a threshold for the minimum transaction score that we detect on a submitted form before we actually do deliver it. Because if they haven't filled in any information, we may just want to ignore it. Okay. What I'd like to describe next, I've talked a little bit about one form of collaboration, which is just the ability to have an anonymous user very simply share the form with somebody else and have them complete it. And it could also then be passed back to them. What I'd like to show you is a feature called review and approval, or more broadly known as collaboration. It'll just take me a second to set these up. I'm actually going to show you two different views. You'll notice our portals, by the way, are also now completely responsive. So this is the portal itself. I'm just going to make sure I'm logged in again. And I'm actually logged in as two different people. I'm logged in as Kathy Smith on the left-hand side and Howard Treisman on the right-hand side. The blue is the customer-facing portal where customers come along and fill in a form, and the right-hand side is my staff portal in orange, which has a few extra tabs and areas that I can view. I'm actually going to shrink this down a little. Hopefully you can still see that, so I can just navigate along these tabs a little easier. You'll notice that the portals themselves are also just for mobile devices, and things like menus and layout all change appropriately. So what I'm going to do is, as an end user, I'm going to fill out a simple form. There's not very much to this form. This is IBC is an international business college, and we're going to request some changes. I'm just going to start filling this in on behalf of Kathy. I'm going to leave most of these details out just to make it as quick as possible. Exceptional circumstance, I'm going to skip the signature, and I'm just going to submit that. That's done. So as a student, I would see that information. I can go into the history tab, and I can actually see that this particular form, when it was last processed, but I can see importantly that my supplementary examination request is being processed. What I'll see here on the right-hand side is an internal staff member. Just hit the refresh button, is that I've been allocated a task, and that's because I'm the designated person to work on this task. And you'll see that I actually have one task in my list, which was a supplementary examination request by Kathy Smith. And just while we're here, I just wanted to also point out that as a staff member, if I have the appropriate privileges, I can also see a list of all of the current pending review and approval tasks, and I can actually go into those and reassign them. So this is kind of a supervisor view, and it allows a supervisor to see all of the tasks that are pending, see who they've been allocated to, and you can see it's there, and reallocate them if necessary. So this just makes it very easy to manage. You can do the same thing in the administrative user interface, but this is aimed more at supervisors rather than IT administrators. So I'm going to go into this task and have a look at it. What you'll see is that I'm getting basically the same form that I saw previously. The fields that the user had filled in are now non-editable, just using regular simple rules and saying making those non-editable based on the particular step that this form is in. But I do also see an extra section in the form that is a very simple approve or deny section. We can make this, again, it's just a form. We can make it as complex or as simple as we like. Not clever enough, or whatever the reason is, and I can simply submit that. Back here, if I refresh the history tab, you'll see that I get the status that the request has been declined. I would generally also this would also be set up to send me emails and other notifications of this. There are also ways of doing more sophisticated. This was just the simplest review and approval task I could possibly set up, which is a one-step review. But we can also do things like reassigning the form back to the user for completion with comments. We can have multi-steps. We can even do things in parallel. I do want to point out that while this looks a lot like workflow, it's not a fully fledged BPM system. If you're looking for a BPM system, you probably should consider investing in one. But we can build a lot of the kind of functionality in a BPM system very simply in Transact, directly in Transact now, and it's all kind of fully integrated. It's not BPMN. It doesn't. It's not necessarily quite as easy to design, and I'm going to show you that in a minute, to design these workflows, although we're looking at improving that. But you can actually build things of relative sophistication, and they're certainly very easy to use. If I go and have a look at how this form is configured, there are really only two things that I needed to do in order to set up this particular form with this simple collaboration service or review and approval service. The first thing is select something called a job controller service, which determines the steps that it goes through. And you can see I've only configured two. And the second thing I need to do is go into the properties, and in this case, just edit one property, and this is the name of it, or the login of the reviewer. That's all I need to do. More sophisticated workflows will actually have more properties, and we can actually go in and design our own workflows or tweak this workflow in other ways. But really, that's we've really tried to keep it very simple with some depth if you need to go there. All right. I'm going to come back to Composer and just show you one or two other features. The specific one I wanted to show you is around performance. Now, we have actually built in a lot of, we've spent quite a lot of time and effort trying to get large and complex forms to perform better, and simply by upgrading to Composer version 4, depending on the nature of your form, how big it is, and exactly what sort of business rules it has in it, and other features, we've seen improvements in, for example, load speed of up to 3 times, and that's simply by upgrading. We've just done a lot of optimizations internally in the forms. But what I'd like to show you is some additional. There are a lot of new features in Composer, but there, in particular, one thing that we've done with performance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a calculation to this full name. I'm going to very simply make it the concatenation of 2 other fields. So it's a concatenation of first name plus last name. I probably should have a space in there, but I'm not going to. I've done it reversed, but anyway. Just to give you the idea, I'm going to save that and display it. And in fact, the business rules in Composer is not really an event system like most programmers are used to. It's actually a constantly running state machine, which constantly looks, as soon as I tab out of this field, the full name field will immediately update. And so there's no need to set up events or listeners or any of those complex things. Basically, it's just a state model which is constantly updated. However, that can actually become a problem when you have very large forms with lots of business rules in them. And we wanted to give you some control over that within the product. And so what we've done is, if I go back into the business rules, if I go into these dependencies, I can change the dependency from being static, so from being dynamic, which is the default, to static. And what that means is that instead of this, the full name field being constantly evaluated, it'll only get evaluated on certain triggering conditions. And in this case, I'm going to specify the triggering condition to be when the current wizard page is shown. Now, you wouldn't normally do this within a page, but imagine that this this full name field is on a different page, and what is going to happen is that calculation will only fire when I actually land on that page rather than continuously. So what you'll see now is the full name field is not being updated, but if you imagine that I'd navigated to a page with that field on, it'll be calculated when I hit that page. And that, the same applies to other types of fields, to other types of rules, including hard shown and other things, and you can really control this in a very fine-grained way, and you can get a lot more performance out of larger, more complex forms. I just mentioned one other thing. There's quite a lot more in Composer, but one other thing that I'll just touch on very briefly is you'll notice that there is an extra level in the workspace on the left. We have our traditional organizations and projects with forms inside them, but we have another level above that. We've actually added a level above, which is called an account. And many of you will actually now become account managers. And as an account manager, you can create your own sub-organizations. Each sub-organization can have different sets of users on it, and you can really manage the users yourself within your accounts. You can also set up sub-organizations to be on different versions of the Composer libraries, and so you can really control exactly when and how you upgrade different organizations or projects within them to different versions of the libraries. And so you just, as an account manager, you have a lot more control over your own environment. And so hopefully that'll enable you to manage your own organizations better. There are a lot of other features, including the ability to create your own libraries and things like that, but I won't go through that in exhaustive detail. I'm kind of done with my top 10 features. I'm going to just touch on one, which was integration. We've done a bunch of integrations. I'm going to skip to Chris and not show you any of our integrations right now. Actually, I might just do one real quick one. And some of you may have seen the beginnings of this feature, something called Type Ahead with back-end integration. So as I'm typing into this field, it's actually coming up. It's going off and hitting one of a number of services that we've integrated with. In this case, for doing online address validation, and it will actually allow me to pull that pull information from back-end services very easily. So we've integrated that with a number of pre-existing address validation providers. I'm not going to touch on that. That's the only thing I'm going to touch on with integration, but we've also pulled in some other integrations into this release, which we can talk about if you're interested. All right, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to hand over to Krish to show you what's new in the mobile app.
Okay, thanks, Howard. So can everybody see my screen okay? Howard, can you confirm that you can see my iPad?
Yep, I can see your iPad. Thanks,
okay.
Chris.
Awesome, thanks. Well, hello, everybody. So like Howard mentioned, I just wanted to take a few minutes and go through some of the top main new features in the Transact via mobile application. Really, there's been three main areas of development. One's around multi-language capabilities. So right now I'm on the login screen for the mobile app, and you'll notice now that we've got this option now to select a language. So right now the mobile app is now configurable, so we can configure static text to be translated based on the language selection that's configured on the server. So just to kind of show that quickly, I can click on any number of language choices that have been configured server side, and the static text that is shown in the mobile app is now translated. So you can imagine this is going to be useful when you roll out the mobile app to a multilingual audience. So yeah, so that's the multi-language support that's offered up in the mobile application. I'm going to switch back to English and actually authenticate. So you notice when we authenticate, we're synchronizing to the server. And once the synchronization is complete, I'm going to focus on two other main areas of functionality that's been included. First thing I want to touch on is the task list. Transact has always had the capability of including geolocation and scheduling time and date information. And what we wanted to do with the mobile application is actually to leverage that metadata associated with a task and provide an alternate view or a series of alternate views. So if we take a look at the task list, by default, we're going to show the traditional task list, where it's just a list of work that's been assigned to a particular individual that's authenticated to the mobile app. Right now, we've got actually two other views, one around geolocation and one around a calendar view. So if I go and flip over to the geolocation view, now you can actually see my location, which is the red, the green pin in the map, and then you can also see the tasks that have been assigned to my named user webinar. So you'll notice now I'm here in Florida, and then we've got some site visits I need to do throughout the week. If I drill down or click any one of these pins, I'm actually going to see specifics about that particular task. So right now you're going to see the particular title of the task, the address where that task is associated with, and then just a description. Because this task has geolocation capabilities and the tablet device has those capabilities as well, I can actually click Navigate. And if I click Navigate, it's actually going to launch into my native mapping capability on my tablet device. So if I've got to visit Lakeland Regional Medical Center, I can click and drive there. So again, it's a neat feature that just leverages some of the things that we've done in Transaction Manager and some of our traditional portals. If I go back to the mobile app, we can flip to the schedule screen. And again, this is just another view. But instead of just showing it as a static list or just a sorted list, we can actually arrange it like you might see in your Outlook calendar. So you'll notice now that we're grouping our particular tasks by day. So you'll notice today I've got a scheduled task that I need to be there at 4 p.m. and then tomorrow and Thursday I've got other work. So it just gives an alternate view into the task list, and it makes the managing of tasks a little easier for an end user, because now we can group them both logically in a time sequence or geolocation specifics. So the last thing I kind of wanted to show was, now that we've actually introduced multilingual and the sorting of tasks both in a geolocation and time scale, we can actually take a look at one of these tasks. So I'm going to click and open one. And it's a fairly simple form, but what I really want to show is some of the integrations we have around adding attachments. In previous releases of the mobile app, we were kind of hamstrung, or we were limited to the device and what we could pull off the device. So what we've done is we've allowed you to configure a Transact mobile app to leverage a cloud-based content management system like Box. So right now, this is just a traditional form, something like Howard showed you during the demonstration. And I've configured an attachment rule here. So if I go to the attachment screen right now that's associated with this form, you'll notice that we have no attachments. If I actually go back to the form and check to make an attachment required, you'll now notice if I go back to the attachment screen, we've got the capability not only to pull an attachment from the camera or the library on my device, but we've also got the capability of configuring a cloud-based storage mechanism like Box.com. So if I click Box.com, I've already authenticated, but right now basically it's asking me to grant access to Box.com. So I'm going to log in with my, I have to, my local account here. So I'm accessing, or I'm allowing Box.com to access the Transact mobile app. So I'm going to grant access, and once I do that, now I can pull attachments from Box.com, so a cloud storage mechanism. So if we go into sample images, I can go and pick my driver's license, for example, and what it does is actually going to download the file from the cloud. And once it does that, I've actually got this available. It's on my device, and then I can actually go and specify the US driver's license attachment. So if I click Save, I've now associated an attachment that was in the cloud with this particular form. So when I go back to the form, I can submit. And when I submit, I'm not only submitting the form data, but also the attachment that I pulled from the cloud. So that's about it as far as the new features that have been introduced to the mobile app. There's been other work done with reliability and performance, but those were the main features I wanted to touch on today. So Howard, I'll hand back control to you.
Thank
if
you
you've
very
got
much, Chris.
something else. Sure.
No, I think we're really done. We have a few minutes for questions. I do see one in the chat pod, which I'll come to in a minute. Um, I did just want to mention before some of you start dropping off, just a little bit about upgrading. So the upgrading process is slightly different for the different modules. For the app, obviously, the new version of the app is in the app stores, and users will be prompted to upgrade that, based on their own settings, or the ones that you may have set with some mobile device management software. So that's available now across all the different versions. Just one comment about the mobile app that we haven't mentioned is that we are the mobile app is slowly being ported to other platforms, and I think we have Windows 8.1 in this release and some other platforms coming soon. The Composer, there have been a lot of changes to Composer, and so we haven't forced an upgrade to everyone. We do encourage you to upgrade because there are a lot of really nice new features in Composer 4, and we'd like to really encourage you to make use of those. But it's really up to you, and as to when you do that, and it's a matter of contacting your account representative and say you're ready to go. You can also maintain for a while a dual system where you have some of your stuff still remaining on Composer 3 and some of your forms migrated over to Composer 4. So there's actually a new Composer system, and you'll migrate things as you see fit. And then with Transaction Manager, some of you have installations on the cloud, and others have installations on premise. And as is normal with Transaction Manager, the upgrade process is up to you as to when you want to do that. However, we do want to try and encourage people to upgrade. We realize that there is some effort associated with that, but the main reason for us encouraging you to do that is that we can better support you if you're on a recent version. There are also a lot of new bug fixes and features in the later versions, and we only typically implement critical bug fixes in patches to older releases. So we would like you all to consider talking to your account reps or your technical account managers about the upgrade process. I have had one question from Ricardo saying, does the review and approval process use the same LDAP accounts? And the answer is yes, it does. I also would like to mention that I did actually set up that particular review and approval process to assign to a particular user. Normally, normally the best practice would be to assign that to a group rather than a particular user, and that way, firstly, we can have anyone in the group performing the task, but also it makes it easier to actually shift people in and out of the group as your organization changes without actually having to change the workflow. And while I'm talking about that, with LDAP, we now also support Active Directory Federation Services, which is a newish service from Microsoft in Active Directory, which makes it a lot easier to have internal users who are authenticated by LDAP interacting with cloud-based services and using the same credentials in both. And so we've integrated with that. That makes it a lot easier to use Transact in the cloud and still use authentication through LDAP. I'm going to throw it out to any other questions. We're almost on the top of the hour. Sarah, do you want to throw open the audio so that